Things with Janelle.
I haven't talked to Janelle a lot for a while. Like business stuff, we talk business stuff.
Cody Brown doesn't hate Christine because she left him. He hates her because she proved he was never the leader he thought he was. Cody Brown's disdain for Christine isn't merely the bitter residue of a bruised ego. It's the unraveling of a long-term power fantasy that collapsed the moment she packed her bags. His fury runs far deeper than rejection. It's the humiliation of losing control over the narrative, the finances, and, most unforgivably, the image of patriarchal dominance he curated so carefully for years. The dream of one big house was not just about unity. It was an empire blueprint. As the legal wife, Robyn would have secured co-ownership, leaving Janelle, Mary, and Christine legally and financially sidelined. Janelle, ever the pragmatist, supported the idea. Mary, clinging to the illusion of rekindled affection, would have complied. Christine, however, refused to sign up for architectural servitude disguised as family harmony. Her defiance didn't just kill the project, it shattered Cody's delusion of control. Then came the final insult, Christine involving the law. The moment child support entered the picture, Cody's self-image as the untouchable patriarch dissolved. Now, in his mind, Christine isn't just an ex-wife. She's a thief, a usurper who dared to demand financial accountability. His sudden interest in spending more time with Truly reeks of strategy, not sentiment. Every visit is a potential deduction, every smile a means to reduce a payment. Truly, tragically, sits in the middle of this charade. Imagine being the child invited into a home where you're tolerated, not welcomed, where your father's new wife never wanted you there to begin with. Robyn's resentment toward Christine's daughter predates the girl's birth. The tension is not subtle. It's palpable.
What's most astonishing is Cody's shock, his genuine disbelief that child support applies to him. After years of televised fatherhood, he somehow imagined he could sire an army of children without facing legal or financial consequences. In his worldview, the rules were for everyone else. Polygamous culture conditioned him to believe that when a wife leaves, she leaves empty-handed, while the children stay behind as part of the patriarchal spoils. The concept of a woman leaving with both her dignity and her kids? Unthinkable. Christine's greatest sin, in Cody's eyes, is that she dismantled the mythology. She didn't leave weeping. She left thriving. She exposed his hollow threats by proving that independence doesn't equal ruin. That revelation threatens his entire power structure. If Christine can survive, maybe the others can too. That, to Cody, is unforgivable. His selective generosity further reveals his priorities. Loyalty, not lineage, determines worth. Robyn's older children, none of whom share his DNA, are supported lavishly because they reinforce his delusion of being a devoted family man. His biological children, however, are penalized for their independence. If Christine offered to absolve him of child support in exchange for letting David adopt Truly, he'd likely leap at the chance. The transaction would restore his illusion of control, allowing him to cut ties under the guise of moral justification. Cody's resentment toward Christine isn't new. It's merely unmasked. From the early seasons, his contempt simmered behind forced smiles and camera-ready posturing. His dismissive tone, the sneering remarks, the weaponized neglect, none of it was spontaneous. Denying medical care to Isabel wasn't about logistics or cost. It was about punishing Christine. His indifference to Truly when the wives were away was another form of silent retribution.
Ironically, Robyn never wanted that infamous big house either. Christine was simply the only one who dared to say it aloud. By the time the fantasy collapsed, Christine had already built a real home, a peaceful one. Her departure became the show's most satisfying narrative arc, the scapegoat escaping her narcissist. And that's the crux of Cody's enduring hatred. Narcissists despise the scapegoat who leaves, because that person was their emotional landfill, the vessel for their shame, blame, and insecurity. When the scapegoat walks away, the narcissist is left staring at their own reflection. To cope, they rewrite the story. The scapegoat becomes the villain, the deserter, the ungrateful rebel. Christine was supposed to crumble. She was supposed to live in regret, in poverty, as living proof of his righteousness. Instead, she flourished. Her happiness is a public indictment of his failure. It was never about love or loss. It was always about control. And Christine's freedom is the one thing Cody can neither rewrite nor repossess.
Cody Brown didn't move because of grief. He moved because guilt doesn't look good in granite countertops. There are plenty of things Cody Brown could blame for the collapse of his life: narcissism, neglect, or perhaps his chronic inability to take accountability. But the walls of his Flagstaff house are not among them. Yet somehow, "I got COVID here" has become his emotional thesis for why he had to sell his home. According to Cody, the very structure that sheltered him became haunted not by the virus, but by his own melodrama. Apparently, Cody's religion doesn't extend to the basic concept of personal responsibility. "I got the call that my son passed in this house," he declares, as if drywall and floorboards conspired against him. Grief is understandable. Projection is not. His son didn't die because of that house, just as his marriage didn't collapse because of it either. The common denominator in every catastrophe Cody endures remains Cody himself. The bad memories excuse is a convenient, tear-stained alibi, but it collapses under scrutiny. Cody didn't move to escape pain. He moved because he found something flashier, a McMansion 2.0 dripping in what he calls opulence. The tragedy wasn't that his house held ghosts. It was that his ego couldn't handle watching everyone else build new lives without him. Fueled by FOMO and delusions of grandeur, he dove headfirst into a purchase he couldn't afford, giddy over money he hadn't actually received yet from the Plague Pond property sale. Even before that sale was finalized, the move was well underway. The numbers don't lie. The timing alone proves it was a decision born of vanity, not grief. And then there's the COVID narrative, a particularly tone-deaf chapter in Cody's ongoing performance of self-pity. His melodramatic retelling of a brush with death is a grotesque parody of what millions endured. He speaks as if a mild fever qualified as a near-death experience, while actual survivors still navigate long-term damage, physical, emotional, and otherwise. For those who buried loved ones or fought for their lives in hospital beds, Cody's theatrics are an insult dressed as empathy. His dramatics might have fooled him, but not the world around him. Real people lived through the nightmare of COVID. Months in hospitals, fighting for breath, holding on to life by IV lines and sheer willpower. Some didn't make it. Families watched from a distance as their loved ones died alone. For those people, Cody's flippant invocation of COVID as a mood-setting prop in his latest sob story isn't just ignorant, it's obscene. There's a tragic irony here. Cody believes a new address will somehow bury his demons. He hasn't yet realized that geography won't save him from himself. His pattern is cyclical. Crisis, denial, deflection, repeat. Until he learns that self-inflicted wounds can't be cured by square footage, no house, however opulent, will keep his ghosts at bay. The problem began with Cody, and it will end with Cody. The only contagion still infecting his world is his refusal to face the truth.
Robyn Brown didn't lose polygamy. She killed it, buried it under a McMansion, and called it faith. Robyn Brown's favorite sermon is the one she preaches about herself, the misunderstood martyr of lost polygamist dreams. Her lamentations about wanting plural marriage and having it cruelly taken from her would almost be moving if they weren't so theatrically hollow. For someone who claims her life's purpose is living the principle, Robyn has spent a remarkable portion of her married life as the lone queen of a very monogamous castle. If religious devotion were truly her North Star, one might ask, why did she never plant herself in a polygamist community, among people who actually practice the faith she claims to revere? Instead, she positioned herself as the authority on how sister wives should behave. lecturing women who lived the lifestyle long before she even entered the picture. It's a curious sort of expertise, built not from experience, but from entitlement. And when the OG 3 wives finally had enough of Cody's selective affection, did Robyn suggest moving somewhere that could rekindle the family's spiritual purpose? Hardly. The woman who supposedly lives for her religion chose instead to clutch her McMansion, her privileges, and her martyrdom. Her faith, it seems, is more decorative than doctrinal, thin as spray paint, applied just thick enough to shine under the studio lights. Her history tells the same story. Married for 9 years before meeting Cody, she now pretends she's never understood monogamy, as though she's been trapped in this one-wife nightmare by divine prank. But the more likely truth is less mystical and far more mundane. She wanted Cody, not his family. The plural marriage pitch was just a costume, one that conveniently disguised ambition, control, and a taste for comfort. It's no coincidence that Robyn appeared when the Browns finally had something worth fighting over: television fame, income, visibility. She skipped the lean years of food stamps and secondhand bread, arriving just in time for the cameras and the cash. And while the original wives juggled survival, she imported debt, demanded spectacle, and somehow emerged as the self-proclaimed victim of everyone else's failure to uphold faith. Her so-called generosity, choosing the Browns over her supposed line of eager suitors, is the cherry on top of her sanctimonious sundae. As though bringing 3 extra dependents and a mountain of bills was a blessing bestowed upon the family. Her contribution to the collective? Emotional chaos, financial strain, and a steady supply of tears for every occasion. Robyn's greatest act of devotion has never been to her religion, her family, or even to truth. It's been to the preservation of her own image. The perfect, suffering saint surrounded by sinners too bitter to understand her holiness. In reality, she is no victim of lost polygamy. She's the architect of its demise. And in her small, narcissistic world, that counts as a spiritual victory. Cody says his love language is touch, but what he really craves is worship. Let's talk about the delusion he calls intimacy. Cody Brown's latest revelation, that his love language is touch, was delivered with the sort of epiphany usually reserved for self-help seminars, not a man who's spent decades proving physical affection is conditional. Yet even that newfound awareness seems to have backfired. This season, Robyn Brown, once the undisputed queen of Cody's emotional marketplace, appears to have closed her shop altogether. The woman who once lectured the original 3 wives about meeting his needs now seems incapable or unwilling to do the same herself. The contrast is almost poetic. Robyn, who built her relationship with Cody on performative adoration and convenient empathy, now seems indifferent. Perhaps perimenopause is dulling her enthusiasm, or perhaps she's simply run out of patience for the endless performance that is Cody Brown, human spotlight. There's also the more strategic possibility. She's waiting out the show's inevitable cancellation before staging her grand exit, house keys in one hand and half the assets in the other. Of course, there's always the unspoken question: has Robyn spiritually outgrown Cody, or is she already negotiating with a prophet for her next celestial upgrade? Either way, her body language screams detachment. Meanwhile, Cody's interpretation of touch remains as graceless as ever. For him, it isn't about intimacy, it's spectacle. A constant need to display his desirability, as though clutching Robyn in front of the cameras could erase years of emotional neglect. It's performative passion at its most exhausting. Even Robyn seems fatigued by the act, visibly recoiling from his public displays of affection. Behind the scenes, one imagines the energy it must take to maintain his theatrics, particularly if, as speculated, he's fueled by testosterone therapy and delusion in equal measure. It's worth noting that Cody's supposed love language seems inconsistent with history. Christine and Mary both cited his lack of physical interest long before Robyn arrived, suggesting that touch was never the issue. It was control. His real language has always been affirmation. Cody doesn't crave connection, he craves validation. He needs to be worshipped, not loved. The irony is that his bond with Robyn was born out of defiance. Their romance thrived on the us against the world dynamic, a rebellious union forged in the tension of a crumbling plural marriage. Now, with no one left to oppose them, there's nothing left to feed that adrenaline. The war is over, and so is the chemistry. Even Cody's Freudian slip about polygamous men getting too much sex and monogamous men not enough betrays a man still obsessed with conquest, not companionship. The implication is as transparent as it is pathetic. He may be gearing up for another wife, another round of televised chaos to keep both his ego and his bank account alive. Meanwhile, Robyn's indifference is almost dignified by comparison. Whether due to menopause or exhaustion, she seems content to let the fantasy fade. When Cody leans in for affection, she stiffens. When he flaunts their connection, she looks vaguely mortified. Like the other wives before her, she's discovered that Cody's touch is less about love and more about optics. What Cody truly wants is what he sees in Christine and David: genuine affection, mutual joy, the kind of bond that can't be scripted. Unfortunately for him, that kind of intimacy can't be staged or shouted into existence. And for Robyn, it seems the final act of devotion may be pretending she still cares enough to play along. Cody Brown didn't just skip his daughter's surgery. He called it a vacation. Let that sink in. Every so often, Cody Brown opens his mouth and reminds the world why Sister Wives is less a show about plural marriage and more a case study in ego management gone wrong. Across the years, his quotes have ranged from delusional to downright repulsive, each one peeling back another layer of self-absorption masquerading as patriarchal wisdom. Let's start with perhaps his magnum opus, suggesting his teenage daughter, Isabel, travel alone for her spinal surgery. Alone, for major surgery. Then, with staggering audacity, he reframed it as a vacation. One could almost admire the creativity, if it weren't so revolting. And while his daughter was under the knife, he attended a wedding instead. Not a family emergency, not a business obligation. A wedding. Father of the Year doesn't quite cover it. He later claimed he couldn't help with her post-op care because he wouldn't wear a mask. This, of course, came from the same man whose wife Janelle once offered to camp in the yard just to support the family, a gesture that was less about health precautions and more a silent protest against his apathy. And in the midst of his daughter's pain, his response? I just want her to get better so I can stop feeling bad. A poetic encapsulation of Cody's worldview. Other people's suffering is tolerable only insofar as it inconveniences him. When confronted with his failures, Cody defaulted to self-pity cloaked as justification. The other wives just couldn't handle that I was willing to fight so much to make sure Robyn was safely kept, he once lamented. Indeed, that fight apparently didn't extend to ensuring the safety, well-being, or emotional stability of his other wives or their children. The result? 3 failed marriages, estranged children, and a dwindling fan base watching in horrified fascination as his empire of delusion collapses. He even lamented that he couldn't be away from his younger children for a few days to attend Isabel's surgery. This from a man who disappeared for 11 days on a honeymoon with Robyn while leaving behind 17 children. The math checks out, only if one subtracts empathy entirely. Every public statement from Kody Brown seems to be a competition between narcissism and cluelessness. Whether officiating a wedding and making it about himself, lecturing women on hormones and modesty, or mansplaining childbirth to a laboring wife, his need to dominate every narrative borders on pathological. Even casual conversations become monologues in self-adulation or self-defense. Some speculate he's intentionally embracing the villain role for television. After all, fame pays better than fatherhood ever did. But intentional or not, the performance has merged with reality. The man who once preached unity now sits atop the rubble of his own creation, lamenting the lack of sex and sympathy while wondering why no one remains safely kept under his care. At this point, the question isn't, what the hell did he just say? But rather, has he ever said anything that wasn't gross, tone-deaf, or self-serving? Because if history is any indication, Kody Brown's next quote won't disappoint, only disgust.
She wanted the whole man. Now she's stuck with every delusional inch of him.
There was a time when Sister Wives was fascinating, an intricate web of relationships, faith, jealousy, and family politics that somehow managed to feel both human and chaotic. Now the only chaos left is whether viewers can make it through an episode without wandering off to the kitchen or opening a new Wordle tab. Kody and Robyn Brown scenes have become the television equivalent of elevator music, uninspired, repetitive, and strangely unsettling when you actually listen closely. Even if Robyn were the saintly figure Kody endlessly paints her as, their segments would still be a snooze. Every shot feels rehearsed, sterilized, and completely devoid of life. Perhaps she's simply tired of being publicly dissected. Understandable, but the result is a performance so flat, it could be mistaken for a wax museum exhibit. And then there's Kody. Once the over-caffeinated showman with his chaotic charm, he's now a caricature of himself, rambling about pheromones, begging Robyn to slap his ass, and smirking through a set of unnaturally white chiclet teeth. The man who once thrived in front of the camera now exudes the energy of that awkward coworker who doesn't notice everyone inching toward the door. It's not just dull, it's gross. There's a fine line between intimacy and nausea, and Kody seems determined to leap over it. Between the utensil licking, the fork sharing, and the recent body odor moment that no one asked for, it's hard to tell if TLC is producing a family reality show or a parody of one. The "you like my smell" moment was less romantic banter and more human resources complaint.
Meanwhile, Robyn's face says what her words won't. She looks perpetually inconvenienced by the very show that funds her oversized home. Her expression drifts somewhere between exhaustion and disdain, like someone forced to babysit a toddler who won't stop performing magic tricks. Every scene is the same. Kody talks about himself, Robyn tolerates it. She got the exclusive Kody experience she fought for, and now looks like she's counting the minutes until it ends. The irony, of course, is delicious. Robyn once relished being the favorite wife, the chosen one. Now she's stuck with the full-time version of the man the other 3 wives escaped. Karma, it seems, has a strong sense of humor and excellent timing. As for the rest of the show, it's not much better. Mary's bike shop monologues, Christine's book promotions, Janelle's quiet independence, it's all become a patchwork of disconnected storylines that lack the original premise's spark. The show worked when it was about plural marriage and the impossible task of keeping it functional. Now it's just about people living separately and occasionally remembering there's a camera in the room. Some viewers admit they keep watching out of sheer habit, trapped in a sunk-cost relationship with a series that no longer delivers. Maybe next week, they tell themselves, it'll get interesting again. It never does. And beneath the tedium lies something darker. The once charismatic patriarch has turned disturbingly manic, oscillating between narcissistic outbursts and bizarre hypersexual displays that border on disturbing. His attempt to channel alluring masculinity instead feels like Jack Nicholson's The Shining audition gone wrong, complete with the same haunted glare. In the end, Sister Wives has become a tragic comedy of its own making. The man who demanded total control is now a spectacle of unraveling ego,
and the woman who schemed for exclusivity is visibly suffocating under it. The wives who escaped may have lost their shared husband, but they regained their peace. And judging by what's left on screen, that looks like the best trait of all.
Forget emotional damage. Cody's out here causing physical destruction. His trees fall faster than his marriages. There's a special kind of irony in watching Cody Brown, reality TV's self-proclaimed patriarch, declare himself an expert in yet another field for which he has no actual qualifications. This time, it's tree felling. Yes, the same man who once dropped a tree on his own truck and, in another stroke of brilliance, managed to fell one onto his McMansion with Robyn. It's a miracle this man hasn't been nominated for a safety PSA titled, "Don't Try This at Home." The ongoing spectacle of Cody and his chainsaw begs the question, why is he always cutting down trees at Coyote Pass? He's not clearing land for construction, not selling timber commercially, and certainly not doing it for the environment. No, it appears to be yet another episode of Cody Does Manly Things, complete with leather gloves, grunting machismo, and a misplaced sense of purpose. If he could bottle his pheromones, he'd probably label it Ode to Ego. Some claim he's selling the lumber, free profit harvested from the shared assets of his ex-wives. Others suspect it's just an excuse to avoid being indoors with Robyn, or confronting his many domestic failures. Either way, it's difficult to decide what's more absurd, the possibility that he's doing it for cash, or that he's simply doing it for the performance of being the man. And performance it is. The man approaches lumber work like a toddler with power tools. No planning, no safety measures, no grasp of physics. Viewers have already seen him and his brother-in-law Caleb attempt tree cutting without the slightest concern for direction control or risk mitigation. The results? Predictably chaotic, as though OSHA were a myth invented to spoil his fun. It doesn't help that Cody seems to operate on the attention span and self-restraint of a 12-year-old boy. He leaps from project to project with the energy of a rabid squirrel, leaving behind a trail of half-finished chaos. The neglect of his own home, crumbling decks, unsafe structures, and all, is proof enough that maintenance isn't in his vocabulary. Whether he's harvesting free money or indulging another hypermasculine fantasy, Cody's tree-cutting escapades perfectly encapsulate his larger problem, an obsession with control and appearance that constantly sabotages him. The man can't even manage a chainsaw responsibly. Yet he still imagines himself as the head of a family, a leader, and now, apparently, a lumberman. If trees could talk, they'd probably file a restraining order. Stay tuned, because morality looks different when there's blood on the lens.